Deep in the frozen wilderness, two northern titans roam the same brutal landscape like rival bosses in a survival video game. One is a towering wall of muscle standing over 7 feet tall at the shoulder, armed with spear-like antlers and bone-shattering kicks powerful enough to send wolves flying like rag dolls. The other is pure wilderness power, a walking tank wrapped in fur, claws, and raw predatory instinct. A brown bear can smell food from miles away, tear apart logs with a swipe of its paw, and overpower almost anything unlucky enough to stand its ground. But what happens when these two giants collide in the icy forests of the north? This isn't just moose versus brown bear. This is a clash between brute survival and apex predation, between an herbivore built like a fortress and a predator built like a wrecking ball. And here's the craziest part. These encounters are completely real. Every year in the wild, brown bears stalk moose calves, challenge adults, and test whether raw hunting power can overcome one of nature's most dangerous prey animals. Because moose are not the gentle forest giants people think they are. These animals can dive underwater to feed on aquatic plants, sprint through deep snow faster than most predators can chase, and deliver kicks so devastating they've killed wolves and even injured bears with a single strike. Meanwhile, brown bears are survival masterminds with memories sharp enough to remember hunting grounds for years. They can switch from peaceful berry eater to unstoppable predator in seconds, using intelligence, patience, and terrifying strength to dominate some of the harshest environments on Earth. So today we're diving deep into the unbelievable secrets, hidden abilities, bizarre adaptations, and terrifying strengths of two of the most powerful animals in the northern wilderness. And by the end of this showdown, you may never look at a moose or a brown bear the same way again. Brown bears combine overwhelming physical power with intelligence that often feels almost unsettlingly human. These animals don't just wander randomly through the wilderness, they mentally map entire territories, remembering berry patches, salmon streams, migration routes, and carcass sites for years before returning at exactly the right season. Their sense of smell is so powerful it borders on science fiction. Under the right conditions, a brown bear can detect food from more than 10 miles away, essentially turning the forest into one giant invisible scent map only they can read. And despite their reputation for brute force, bears often rely on strategy as much as strength. During salmon runs, some bears deliberately position themselves beneath waterfalls where exhausted fish repeatedly fail their jumps, creating an all-you-can-eat buffet with almost zero effort. Others think even further ahead. Brown bears will sometimes bury excess food beneath dirt, moss, and branches to preserve it for later, almost like giant wilderness survivalists creating hidden emergency supply caches throughout the forest. That combination of memory, patience, intelligence, and raw power is what makes brown bears so dangerous. They're not just strong enough to dominate their environment, they're smart enough to exploit it in ways many predators simply can't. Instead of immediately attacking rivals, brown bears often rely on intimidation displays designed to end conflicts before they begin. They'll pop their jaws loudly, perform explosive bluff charges, or rise onto their hind legs to make themselves look even more enormous, creating the kind of scene that would make most animals instantly reconsider every life choice that led them there. Even their claws reveal how adaptable these animals really are. Coastal brown bears often use their claws to stabilize slippery salmon or dig shellfish from muddy shorelines, while inland populations rely more heavily on them for excavating roots, tearing apart logs full of insects, and digging winter dens into frozen ground. What's even more fascinating is how quickly bears can adapt to humans. Around towns and settlements, many brown bears completely alter their daily schedules, becoming largely nocturnal so they can avoid people while still accessing feeding areas under the cover of darkness. And they may remember us far more than we realize. Research suggests brown bears can recognize individual humans and remember whether past encounters involve danger, harassment, or food, meaning a bear's behavior toward people can actually be shaped by personal experience over time. But perhaps the most unbelievable thing about brown bears is what happens when winter arrives. Their version of hibernation is less like sleeping and more like entering a biological survival mode that almost feels scientifically impossible. Unlike smaller hibernating animals that become nearly helpless, brown bears remain semi-alert throughout winter and can wake rapidly if threatened. Pregnant females take things even further by giving birth inside their dens during this dormant period, somehow caring for newborn cubs while surviving almost entirely off stored body fat. And the physiology behind it is astonishing. Their bodies recycle nitrogen, preserve muscle mass, and prevent major bone deterioration so efficiently that bears emerge months later in far better physical condition than a human would after even a fraction of that inactivity. Female bears also use one of nature's most incredible reproductive strategies: delayed implantation. Fertilized embryos only begin developing if the mother has stored enough fat reserves to survive winter successfully, meaning the pregnancy itself is partially controlled by environmental conditions and survival odds. Then comes something scientists sometimes call bear culture. Cubs don't just inherit instincts from their mothers. They actively learn migration routes, feeding grounds, hunting behaviors, and survival strategies passed down across generations like ancient wilderness knowledge. And beyond being apex predators, brown bears also reshape entire ecosystems in ways most people never see. By dragging salmon carcasses deep into forests, they transport ocean nutrients far inland, feeding plants, insects, birds, scavengers, and even the soil itself. So in a strange way, brown bears aren't just surviving inside the wilderness. They're helping build and sustain the very ecosystems they rule. Giant furry ecosystem engineers wrapped in muscle, claws, intelligence, and one of the most advanced survival systems anywhere in the animal kingdom. Moose are far more aquatic than most people realize. For an animal that looks like it was assembled out of tree trunks and leftover construction equipment, they're surprisingly comfortable in deep water, almost like nature accidentally built a deer submarine hybrid. Despite being the largest members of the deer family, moose regularly swim for miles across freezing lakes and rivers without hesitation. Some have even been recorded diving more than 18 feet underwater to feed on nutrient-rich aquatic plants growing at the bottom. And somehow, they're perfectly engineered for it. Their oversized nostrils can close like waterproof valves while submerged, and their partly hollow fur traps air, giving them natural buoyancy in icy northern waters that would leave most animals in full panic mode. Those long, awkward-looking legs aren't just there to make moose look hilariously oversized. They function like biological snowshoes and snowplows, helping these giants march through deep winter drifts that slow predators like wolves and bears to an exhausting crawl. Then there's the massive shoulder hump, a thick wall of pure muscle that powers their movement through snow, mud, and rough terrain. Put it all together, and a moose starts to look less like a deer and more like a cold weather survival machine engineered specifically for the brutal northern wilderness. But underneath that calm, almost goofy appearance is an animal that can become terrifyingly dangerous in seconds. Moose are highly tuned survival specialists with senses sharp enough and weapons powerful enough to intimidate nearly anything sharing the forest with them. Their giant ears rotate independently like satellite dishes, constantly scanning for danger from multiple directions at once. At the same time, they can detect subtle vibrations moving through snow-covered ground, giving them an early warning system against approaching predators. And predators absolutely respect them for a reason. Wolves may launch coordinated attacks that last for hours, sometimes even days. But even an exhausted moose remains incredibly dangerous because it can kick forward, sideways, and backward with enough force to shatter bones or crush skulls instantly. Then come the antlers, which honestly look less like decorations and more like medieval siege weapons. Bulls grow these enormous racks at astonishing speed every year, making them some of the fastest growing bone structures anywhere on Earth. During a single summer, some antlers can gain dozens of pounds as blood rushes through a velvet-covered layer of living tissue feeding the growth. But once autumn arrives, that velvet peels away, revealing hardened bone weapons built for violent rut-season battles, where two bulls collide with enough force to sound like trees smashing together in the forest. Moose don't just survive inside northern forests, they quietly reshape them. By stripping bark from trees, trampling vegetation, and constantly browsing young saplings, these giants act like living bulldozers that influence which plants survive and which parts of the forest continue growing for decades. In some areas, entire ecosystems subtly change based on where moose feed the most. It's one of the reasons scientists sometimes call them ecosystem engineers. Even though most people just see a giant deer wandering through the snow looking mildly confused. And somehow, moose may be even smarter about survival than they appear. Researchers believe they sometimes self-medicate by selectively eating aquatic plants containing compounds that help reduce parasite loads, meaning these animals may instinctively use nature like a giant underwater pharmacy. Their calves also grow at an unbelievable pace because the wilderness gives them absolutely no grace period. The moment a calf is born, danger is already waiting nearby in the form of wolves, bears, and brutal weather conditions. That's why young moose develop shockingly fast. Within only a few days of birth, some calves can already outrun humans, which is honestly terrifying when you remember they're attached to legs that already look like stilts from another planet. But despite their immense size and rugged appearance, moose have a hidden weakness that's becoming a growing problem: heat. Their thick insulating coats were designed for brutal northern winters, not warming temperatures, and weather humans consider pleasant can push moose into dangerous heat stress surprisingly quickly. As climates warm across northern regions, these cold-adapted giants are facing new challenges from overheating, parasites, and habitat shifts. So while moose may look indestructible, even one of the toughest animals in the north is now battling a changing world it wasn't fully built for. In a hypothetical showdown between a moose and a brown bear, the moose would enter the fight with some absolutely terrifying advantages right from the start. A full-grown bull moose can weigh well over 1,000 pounds, stand taller than many bears at the shoulder, and carry antlers that look less like decoration and more like sharpened tree branches strapped to a living battering ram. And unlike smaller deer that survive mainly by running away, moose have a reputation for being shockingly aggressive when cornered. They can strike forward, sideways, and backward with crushing kicks powerful enough to break a wolf's spine, or seriously injure a bear unlucky enough to get too close. Those long legs aren't just useful for snow and swamps either. They give the moose incredible reach, allowing it to stomp downward like a giant piston while keeping dangerous distance between itself and an attacker. In open terrain or deep snow, that advantage becomes even more dangerous. A moose could potentially use its height, reach, and relentless kicking ability to keep a brown bear at bay long enough to force the predator into retreat. Because even apex predators don't enjoy getting hit by what basically amounts to a flying sledgehammer with hooves. And one direct antler strike could end the fight instantly. A charging bull moose has enough force behind its body weight and antlers to inflict catastrophic injuries in seconds, turning what looks like prey into something far closer to a walking medieval weapon platform. But the moose does have one major weakness: endurance during prolonged combat. While incredibly dangerous defensively, moose are not specialized killers, and if a confrontation drags on too long, exhaustion becomes a serious problem. That's where the brown bear becomes terrifying, because what the bear brings into the fight isn't just strength, it's experience. Brown bears regularly battle rivals, overpower large prey, and instinctively know how to target weak points during violent encounters. A bear's massive forelimbs, razor claws, crushing bite force, and low center of gravity make it extremely difficult to intimidate or knock down once fully committed. Unlike the moose, which depends heavily on distance and defensive strikes, the bear excels in brutal close-range combat, where raw grappling power becomes decisive. And bears are often smarter fighters than people expect. Instead of charging recklessly, many rely on patience, positioning, and pressure, slowly wearing opponents down while waiting for the perfect opening. If the brown bear manages to slip past the antlers or latch onto the moose's neck, shoulders, or legs, the balance of power changes dramatically. At that point, the fight becomes less about reach and more about whether the moose can escape before the bear's strength and predatory instincts take over completely. In most scenarios, especially in tighter terrain like forests, brush, or uneven ground, the brown bear would likely have the advantage due to its durability, combat experience, and ability to absorb punishment while continuing to attack. Bears are built for violent physical encounters in ways moose simply aren't. But this would never be an easy victory, because no matter how powerful the bear is, one perfectly placed kick or antler strike from a full-grown moose could turn the entire fight deadly almost instantly. And that's what makes this matchup so fascinating. One animal survives through overwhelming defense, raw size, and devastating counterattacks. The other survives through intelligence, endurance, and predatory efficiency. When those two worlds collide in the frozen wilderness, even nature itself doesn't guarantee a clean outcome. The deeper you dive into the world of moose and brown bears, the more these animals start to feel less like ordinary wildlife and more like creatures pulled straight out of mythology. Moose aren't just oversized deer wandering through snowy forests. They're aquatic survival machines capable of diving underwater, sensing danger through ground vibrations, and reshaping entire ecosystems simply by moving through them. Brown bears are just as unbelievable in completely different ways. They aren't merely brute force predators crashing through the wilderness looking for food. They're intelligent strategists with astonishing memory, near supernatural senses, and biological adaptations so advanced that they can survive months of hibernation without losing much muscle or strength. And when these northern giants cross paths, nature reveals something fascinating about survival itself. Victory isn't always decided by who's bigger, stronger, or more aggressive. It often comes down to timing, terrain, endurance, instinct, and one critical mistake. A moose can transform into a living fortress capable of turning predators into casualties with a single kick. A brown bear can patiently outlast, outmaneuver, and overpower animals that would terrify almost anything else in the forest. That's why every real encounter between them feels unpredictable. One second, the bear looks unstoppable. The next, a towering moose swings the balance of power with pure explosive force. And maybe that's the real beauty of the northern wilderness. Out there, survival is never clean, fair, or guaranteed. The forests, rivers, and frozen valleys don't care who's king. They only reward the animal that adapts, endures, and survives one more brutal winter. Because in the end, there are no referees in nature, no mercy, no perfect outcomes. Just two ancient legends of the North colliding in one of the harshest environments on Earth, fighting to survive another season in the wild.